as I was just telling you before, I think one of the most chilling parts of your book is the family chronology at the end of the book, because it's a list of normalcy of you in England next to horrific events of displacement and murder that were going on in Czechoslovakia. You know, for example, there's the death of your grandfather at what became the ghetto at the fortress of Terezin, followed by the joyous birth of your sister in England, your enrollment in kindergarten, a proud moment, I think, as you describe it, with your uniform of proper English girl, followed by two more relatives that are transported to Terezin. Was the stark chronology of that list a way of understanding the sacrifices that your parents made, or is this the academic in you that needs to list these things?
Probably both, and I think also as kind of a guidepost to indicate the cruelty of what was going on in one place with the semi-normalcy of the other, and a point that I make about my parents, which is that they did everything they could to make the abnormal seem normal.
You say that.
So while you talk about the normalcy in England, it wasn't exactly normal either when I go back at it. These people, relatively young, who came from good families, and who, I love to imagine this part. Czechoslovakia was formed in 1918. A new country as a result of World War I and the dissolution of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. For people that have been in Prague, they know how beautiful it is, and a lot of it is Art Deco, and very much, and here was this new country. And my parents were the generation that were kind of the new generation that were, and they taught Cafe Society, and they talked about having this really Art Deco black and white apartment, and live, you know, my mother shopping with her friends, and my father being a diplomat, a young diplomat. All of a sudden, they end up in England. My father speaks English, my mother doesn't, and they try to figure out places that they can live, how they can live, and we end up in an apartment house in Notting Hill Gate, which now is very posh.
I lived there.
Well, I mean, and then I went there, Margot, and I now see it backs up on Portobello Road, but who knew, you know? And so we lived in this apartment building, right. I remember this, which was full of refugee families. And we were in London during the Blitz, and so now when I went back to visit there, I said a really stupid thing to the woman who lived in the apartment. I said, "Is the cellar still there?" She said, "Of course it's there." And we have had an argument with the superintendent because he will not modernize it at all. "I'll take you down." And I had one of these moments where all of a sudden the same hideous green paint that was down there that I remember as a child was still there. So, and then after the Blitz, we moved out to the country, to Walton-on-Thames, where the thing to do was to buy this huge steel table that you could, if you were under it, and they said if your house was bombed, you would survive. So I spent a lot of my so-called normalcy eating cold meat and bubble and squeak, and being in air raid shelters, and my father being an air raid warden. It was normal in comparison to what was going on in Czechoslovakia. And one of the things that was so chilling about the chronology was, I think one of the truly amazing aspects during the war period was the Czechoslovak resistance actually assassinated Heydrich, who was the Reichsprotector. And it was the only assassination of a high-level Nazi official. And there obviously was retribution from it. And the major retribution was that they destroyed an entire town called Lidice. But what I noticed when I put all the dates together, they were rounding up Jews after that, and right after that, a couple of days later, my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, was sent to Terezin. So the connection between those two things. Or then my paternal grandmother and this young cousin were sent to Auschwitz on the third to last train. If it had been a week later, they would have survived. So putting those kinds of dates together was the really chilling part. And it was that combination of things, people being born and people being killed, that was the horrible contrast.
Okay, so yes, it was truly chilling reading that. I know you've thought a lot about the question of identity. You identified as a Czech and as an American, but not as a Jew, because of course you didn't know that part of your history. Once you learned that part of your history, you must have gone through a process before resolving who you were once again. So 2 questions about that. Describe that process to us, and finding out that your parents were Jewish was just the tip of the iceberg. Did it cause you to search for your roots? And if it did, how far did you go?
Well, first of all, I was raised a Roman Catholic.
Right.
My parents were baptized in England in May 1941.
All the same time, right?
All at the same time.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out why, what, and I just have to keep emphasizing this is speculation. So I don't think it was for them to escape the Holocaust because they were already in England.
Right.
I also don't think it was in order to fool their friends who must have known they were Jewish, of Jewish background. So I think that it must have had something to do with preserving their child, and I don't think a lot of people would question that it was probably safer to raise somebody as Christian than Jewish during World War II. But also, I think my mother was quite spiritual, and she had some good friends who were Catholic, and I think that they were persuaded. Catholicism was the majority religion of Czechoslovakia or the Bohemia, and so I think that was the reason. I speculate, knowing what my parents were like and their value system and their humanity, that had they known that 6 million Jews were going to die, they would never have done it. But that again is...
And you say that
I
in
say
the book.
that. I think that I have tried to, I'm often asked, how did it change my value system? And in a strange way, it didn't, because I always knew about the Holocaust. Nobody ever, I was brought up knowing what had happened during World War II. It just never occurred to me that it applied to anybody in my family. But I did know that Munich was the cause of the disaster, and I knew about the fact that nobody paid attention to what was going on, that Neville Chamberlain talked about Czechoslovakia as that faraway place with people with unpronounceable names, and that the West had kind of let a whole group of people down, and that it never occurred to me that I'd be Secretary of State or Ambassador to the UN. But the bottom line is I did know that one had to stand up and not allow this kind of thing to happen. And so my parents, I think, brought me up with the right value system about this. So I have been alternately fascinated and just terribly sad. I mean, somebody said, well, tell me about the book. I said, it's very sad. They said, you're never going to sell it if you keep saying it's sad. But the bottom line, it is a very, very tragic story.
Right.
The positive part about it is that it shows the resilience of the human spirit and hope, and that there is humanity among people. But when I think about it, and this is what I do think about, as I said, my parents really did work to make my life and my brother and sister's life as normal as possible. And coming to America was the most important thing, I think, that they did. And now what makes me so sad is thinking that they knew all this and that they spent their lives making sure that we did not have to live through it with them, which must have been really, really difficult for them.
And really, really courageous.
Yeah, that's the way I feel about it.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. So you're a Jewish Catholic. So how does that work?
I am many things. I confuse. I have interfaith discussions.
And Hanukkah and Christmas.
No, I mean, because I was raised a Catholic, became an Episcopalian.
Right.
When I got married and found out I was Jewish. So, but... who am I? So I am those things. I am a mother, I'm a grandmother, I'm a Democrat, big D and small d. I am somebody who has worked, somebody who has taught, somebody who is very proud to be in the government. I am an American, and as
You're
America,
a woman.
I am indivisible.
Right.
So that is how.
That's very good. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's good.